that multitude of varied men who escaped from the country in the emigration, who left it in disgust, or even who remained in France but despaired of French fortunes in the turmoil of 1793. It is perhaps a worthy excuse for Dumouriez' failure to point out that he also was one of those whom the court might have used had it known how to use men, but the court had no such knowledge. Danton. The character of Danton has more widely impressed the world than of any other revolutionary leader, because it contained elements permanently human, independent of the democratic theory of the time, and necessary neither to the support of that theory nor to the criticism of it. The character of Danton appeals to that sense in man which is interested in action and which in the field of letters takes the form of drama. His vigor, his personal strength of mind and body, the individuality of his outline, arrest equally the man who loves the revolution and the man who hates it, and the man who is quite indifferent to its success or failure. It is on this very account that historians, especially foreign historians, have tended to misinterpret the man. Thus Carlyle, who has great intuition in the matter, yet makes him out farmer-like, which he certainly was not. Michelet, fascinated by his energy, presents him as something uncouth, and in general those who would describe Danton stand at a distance, as it were, where his loud voice and forcible gesture may best be appreciated. But a man to be seen truly must be seen in intimacy. Danton was essentially a compound of two powerful characters in man. He was amative or constructive, and at the same time not only possessed but liked to exercise lucidity of thought. The combination is among the strongest of all those that go to build up human personalities. That which was amative and constructive in him, his virility, if you will, brought him into close touch with reality. He knew and loved his own country, for instance, and infinitely preferred its happy survival to the full development of any political theory. He also knew and loved his fellow countrymen in detail and as persons. He knew what made a Frenchman weak and what made him strong. The vein of Huguenotry, though he did not know it for what it was, he disliked in his compatriots. On the other hand, the salt and freshness of the French was native to him, and he delighted in it. The freedom of their expression, the noise of their rhetoric, and the military subsoil of them were things to all of which he immediately responded. He understood their sort of laughter, nor was he shocked as a man less national would have been at their peculiar national vices, and in especial their lapses into rage. It is this which must account for what all impartial judgment most blames in him, which is his indifference to the cruelties, his absorbed interest in foreign and military affairs at the moment of the massacres of September. This touch with reality made him understand in some fashion, though only from without, the nature of the Germans. The foolish mania of their rulers for mere territorial expansion unaccompanied by persuasion or the spread of their ideas, he comprehended. The vast superiority of their armies over the disorganized forces of the French in 1792 he clearly seized. Hence, on the one hand, his grasp of their foreign policy, and on the other, his able negotiation of the retreat after Valmy. He also understood, however, and more profoundly, the rapid self-organization of which his own countrymen were capable, and it was upon this knowledge that his determination to risk the continuance of the war reposed. It should be remarked that both in his military and in his quasi-military action he was himself endowed in a singular degree with that power of immediate decision which is characteristic of his nation. His lucidity of thought permitted him to foresee the consequences of many a revolutionary decision, and at the same time inclined him to a strong sympathy with the democratic creed, with the doctrine of equality, and especially with the remoulding of the national institutions, particularly his own profession of the law, upon simple lines. He was undoubtedly a sincere and convinced revolutionary, and one whose doctrine more permeated him than did that of many of his contemporaries, their less than solid minds. He was not on that account necessarily Republican. Had some accident called his genius into play earlier in the development of the struggle, he might well, like Mirabeau, with whom he presents so curious a parallel, have thought it better for the country to save the monarchy. It must always be remembered that he was a man of wide culture, and one who had achieved an early and satisfactory professional success. He was earning a sound income at the moment of his youthful marriage. He read English largely and could speak it. His dress was not inexpensive, and though somewhat disordered, as often it is with the men of intense energy and constant gesture, it never gave an impression of carelessness or disarray. He had many and indifferent intellectual interests, and was capable thereof of intelligent application in several fields. He appreciated the rapid growth of physical science, and at the same time the complexity of the old social conditions, too widely different from contemporary truths. To religion he was, of course, like all men of that time, utterly indifferent. But unlike many of them, he seized the precise proportion of its remaining effect upon certain districts and certain sections of the countryside. There has been a tendency latterly to exaggerate the part which Freemasonry played in the launching of him. He was indeed a member of a Masonic lodge, as were for that matter all the men, conspicuous or obscure, democratic or utterly reactionary, who appeared upon the revolutionary stage. Probably the king, certainly old aristocrats like the father of Madame de Lamballe, and the whole host of the middle class, from men like Bailly to men like Condorcet. But it is reading history backwards and imagining the features of our own time to have been present a century ago, to make of Masonry the determining element in his career. Danton failed and died from two combined causes. First, his health gave way. Secondly, he obtruded his sanity and civilian sense into the heated fury and calculated martial law of the second year of the Republic. To both that fury and that calculation he was an obstacle. His opposition to the Terror lost him the support of the enthusiasts, but it was the interference which such a judgment made in the plans of the soldiers, and notably of Carnot, that determined his condemnation and death. He also, like Mirabeau, will undoubtedly increase as the years proceed, and if only as a representative of the national temper, become more and more the typical figure of the Revolution in action. The end of section 8.